Hi, this is Matt with AppliancePartsPros.com. Today we'll be showing you how to repair your appliance. Remember, anytime you work on an appliance, make sure it's unplugged or the circuit breakers are off so there's no chance of electrocution. In this video, we're going to show you how to change out the KitchenAid mixer drive motor. It's going to be a very easy repair and should only take a few minutes to show you how to do it. If you already have one of these, great. If not, you can click on the link below or get it at AppliancePartsPros.com. When you open up the package, you're going to get the new drive motor. The drive motor drives the mixer. The main reason to be changing it out is if it's failed and the mixer is not turning. In order to change the part, we have to open up the mixer. We're going to take off the accessories just to get them out of the way. You want to make sure the bowl is in the down position. And then we can reach in and take off the beater. All you have to do is lift up on it, turn it clockwise, and then let it drop down. You can pull it out. To get the bowl off, we're just going to lift it off the mounting pegs and pull it out. Now we're around at the back of the mixer. We're going to use a Phillips screwdriver to take out the screw that holds the trim on. Once you have the screw out, you can pull the trim off and set it aside. With the trim out of the way, we can use the Phillips screwdriver to take out the 4 screws that hold the cover on. There's 2 on this side and 2 on the other side. Once you have all 4 screws out, you can lift the cover off and set it aside. Now that we have the cover off, we can use the Phillips screwdriver to take out the 2 screws that hold the speed control board in place. Once you have both screws out, we're going to lift the board up and out of the way. We have to use a small flathead screwdriver to release the tabs that hold the little sensor in. Just have to press on each side and get them to release. Once you have both tabs released, you can pull the sensor out of the motor, and then we can swing the speed control out of the way. If your mixer has the old transmission housing like ours does, the manufacturer recommends that you upgrade it to the metal housing because it's stronger. We're not going to show you in this video because that part has its own video. We're going to use a Phillips screwdriver to take out the 4 screws that hold the transmission cover down. Once you have all the screws out, we can lift the transmission housing off. Now that we have the housing off, we can disconnect the wires from the speed control board. There's 2 wires coming off the motor. The left one goes to motor 1 and the right one goes to motor 2. We're just going to use a small needle nose pliers to help pull these off. Once you have both wires off, we're just going to untangle them so we can get the wires free. Once you have them free, you can let the speed control board set down out of the way. Then we're going to use the Phillips screwdriver to take out the 2 screws that hold the motor to the lower housing. Now that we have the screws out, we can lift up on the motor. We're going to first use a small flathead screwdriver and take the motor shaft seal off. We're going to have to put this on the new one. If yours is damaged, you may want to replace it, but otherwise we can reuse it. Then we have to look at the end of the motor shaft and count how many teeth you have. Ours is the older style motor that has 8 teeth, and because we have that, we have to change out a few other parts to make the new motor work. If you have the newer style motor that has 10 teeth on it, all you have to do is pull it out of the mixer so we can put the new one in. If you had the old 8-tooth motor like we have, it also has a worm gear that only has 53 teeth on it. The newer one has 60, and also the rear sleeve bearing, the front sleeve bearing, and the thrust bearing are different. So we're going to have to upgrade these parts at the same time. The other part that we have to change out is the lower housing. They redesigned the motor and it's bigger. You can see it has a larger opening here, and they actually opened up this space right here so the new motor will fit. Ours, you're not able to fit the big square motor into this one, so we have to change out the housing. In order to change out the lower housing, we have to take all the gears off. So we're just going to lift out the worm gear assembly with the sleeve bearings and everything. We're not going to reuse this, so you don't have to clean it up or anything. Just set it out of the way. You can probably throw it away later. Once you have that out, we're going to carefully clean out all the grease. It's probably an older mixer if you're changing this, so just clean out all the grease and we'll put new stuff on after. Once you have as much grease off as you can, we're going to grab a rag and try to clean off the bevel gear as much as you can so we can get the snap ring off. Now that we have it cleaned up, we're going to use the snap ring pliers to remove the snap ring that holds the bevel gear on. You just have to get the pins in the holes on the snap ring, and you can spread it apart. You want to be careful, only spread it apart far enough so you can lift it up. You don't want to bend the snap ring, we're going to reuse it. Once you have it off, you can set it aside. Now that we have the snap ring off, we can lift the bevel gear off. If it's on there tight, you have to lift up on it with a small flathead screwdriver. Once you have it off, you can set it aside. Once you have the bevel gear off, we're just going to push this pin out. We're just going to use a punch. It shouldn't be in there that tight. And just push it out. As you're taking it out, you want to make sure you hold the planetary so it doesn't fall. Once you have the pin out, you can set it aside and then slowly let the planetary drop down. Once it's free, you can pull it off and set it aside. Once you have it out, we can lift the worm gear off and set that aside. Now that we have the gear case taken apart, we can take off the speed control board. We're going to follow the wires up from the power cord. Got the white wire that goes to the neutral. You can use a small needle nose pliers to help take these off. The other one, the black one, comes up to the micro switch. So we're going to take that off real quick. And then you have to follow it up, and it goes over here to the P5. Once you have all the wires off, you can separate them from the wires that are staying with the board. And you can set the speed control board aside. Next, we're going to use the Phillips screwdriver to take off the screw that holds the ground wire on. Once you have the grounding wire off, we have to remove the 3 screws that hold the lower housing onto the base assembly. It's a number 3 Phillips. It's pretty big, so make sure you use the right size and don't strip out the screws. These are also put in there pretty tight so the mixer doesn't fall apart. So we're going to use a ratchet to break them loose. It's going to be really hard to try to do with just a hand screwdriver. As you're taking the last one out, you want to make sure you hold the housing so it doesn't fall off. Once you have the last screw out, we're going to carefully lift up on the housing and then turn it over. And we just have to pull the cord out of the housing. You should just be able to lift up on it, pull it out. And carefully pull the wires through. Once you have the cord free, you can separate it and set it aside. Then we can set the housing aside. Here's the old drive motor next to the new one. If you already have one of these, great. If not, you can get it at appliancepartspros.com. As you can see, they redesigned the older, smaller 8-tooth motor to the new, larger 10-tooth motor, but it'll go in and work just fine. To put the new lower housing on, first thing we're going to do is route the power cord through. So we're just going to put the wires up through the opening. Once you have all the wires through, we're just going to lift the power cord up in and snap it into place. Once you have it in place, we can set the lower housing onto the base and grab the back screw, and then we'll just tighten it down real quick with a regular Phillips head screwdriver so we don't have to hold the housing anymore. We'll grab the other two screws. Once you have them hand tight, we can grab the ratchet with the extension and the number 3 Phillips bit, and we can tighten these down so the base and the housing don't come loose. If you have to, you can hold on to the lower housing. Make sure you get it nice and tight. Looking over the new housing, it looks like they didn't put threads in any of these holes. It's okay, you can just drive the screws in, but just be aware that when you're putting them in, it may feel like it's a little bit harder than it should be. Now we can put the ground wire back on. We're just going to set it in place and use the Phillips screwdriver to put the screw in. Now that we have the ground wire on, we can reconnect the speed control board. To put the speed control board on, we're just going to connect the wires that come off of the power cord. So the white wire went to the neutral connector. Just have to push these on so you get a good connection. And then the black wire, the small terminal, went onto the little micro switch. And then the wire went over to the P5 unswitched on this side. Once you have all the wires attached, we're just going to set the speed control board down so we can put the gear case together. First thing we're going to do is reach underneath and grease up the external gear. You just have to fill up the teeth, make sure they're all lubed up. Now we can grease up the worm follower gear. We're not going to put it in right now, but we want to have it ready so when we lift the planetary assembly into place, we can set it down. Once it's greased up, you can just set it aside. Now we can grease up the pinion gear. It's the gear that's mounted on the planetary assembly. Same as we did the external gear. We're just going to fill in the teeth. Once you have it greased up, we can lift it in from below. Just have to line up the planetary shaft with the bearing. You can lift it up all the way. If it doesn't go up, you may have to turn the shaft a little bit so the gears line up. Then we can put the worm follower gear on that we greased up earlier. When you set it down, you want to make sure that the raised portion is up. And just push the gear down so it bottoms out. Once you have it all the way down, you want to still hold on to the planetary. We have to put the pin in to hold it in place. Should just push right in. You want to kind of center it, and then you have to turn the worm follower gear so the pin is in line with it, just like this. So that way when you set the beveled gear down on top of it, it sits all the way down. Once you have it in there, you can let go of the planetary. Now we're going to grease up the bevel gear. Just want to get all the teeth filled in. And when you're filling up this gear case, you're going to use about 6 ounces of this grease between putting it on the gear teeth and then packing it in later. Once you have it greased up, you're going to have to line up the pin so it goes into its little cutout there on the bottom of the gear. So you just want to flip it over and put it down the shaft and make sure it goes down all the way. Once you have it down all the way, you should be able to see the little groove where the snap ring is going to go. So we're going to grab the snap ring pliers and put that back in. To put the snap ring on, we're just going to put the pins from the snap ring pliers in it and then line it up with the shaft. Remember, you only want to open up the ring enough to get it over the shaft. You don't want to open up too far and bend it. Once you have it down all the way, you can pull the pliers out, but sometimes the pins don't let you push it down all the way, so you may have to push down on it with a small flathead screwdriver to make sure it's in the groove. Whether you're putting in the new worm assembly or just putting back in your old one, you want to pull the front bearing off and the front thrust bearing race so we can put some grease down into the little ball bearings. Once you have it greased up, you can put the race back on. Make sure the side with the grooves goes against the ball bearings. And then you can put the sleeve bearing on. Make sure that the side with no flange goes towards the thrust bearing. Then we can grease the whole assembly up. Once you have it greased up, you can set it into place. You want to make sure that the flat spots on the front and the rear bearings are vertical so they fit into the housing correctly. All you have to do is set it into place. Now we can pull the hub attachment gear out of the old housing. Remember, the manufacturer recommends if you have this old plastic type that you change it. So we're going to take the gear out. And like we said before, we're not going to change out our housing because that part has its own video. But we're just going to clean off this gear and put some new grease on it. Once you have it greased up, we can put it into the housing. You should have the new metal one, but it goes in the same way. Once you have it in the housing, you can set it aside. At this point, this is where you would join us if you already had the 10-tooth motor. You just have to put the motor back into the housing. So we're going to push the motor seal on. You just have to carefully slide the motor shaft seal over the shaft and push it down into the motor. Once you have it seated, you can set the motor into place. And then when you put the screws in to hold the motor down, you don't want to push very hard forward, but you want to make sure that the seal is up against the housing right here. So just make sure you push forward a little bit, and then we can put the screws in to tighten the motor down. We're just going to use the Phillips screwdriver to put these screws in. As you're tightening down the screw, you want to make sure you keep that little bit of pressure on the motor until you have the first screw in to hold it in place. If you had to change out the grease while you were in here, now is the time that we're going to take all the extra grease, whatever's left from the 6 ounces that you measured out, and we're going to pack it around this whole area and make like a cone around everything. You don't want to put any of the grease into the housing because it won't get onto the gears. To put the housing on, all you have to do is line it up and flip it over. And just carefully set it down. Once you have the housing in place, we can use a Phillips screwdriver to put the screws back in. Now we can hook the wires back up to the speed control assembly. Remember, the left one went to motor 1 and the right one went to motor 2. But remember when these were in here how the wires were twisted up, and that's so the excess wire didn't go up and touch the housing of the mixer. So we're going to lift this into place, and then we're going to take and kind of wind this wire around these and then plug it into motor 2. Then we're going to take the left wire and same thing, kind of wrap it around all the wires and then plug it into motor 1. Now that we have the wires attached, we can put the sensor on the motor. We just have to kind of swing the board out of the way a little bit and snap the sensor into the motor. It can only go one way. Just push it down so it snaps in. Then we can set the speed control board back in place and use the Phillips screwdriver to put the screws in. Now we can put the cover back on. If you're changing over from the old style motor to the new style motor like we are, you're going to have to change the cover to the new style. I'm just going to line it up and set it down in place. Once you have it in place, we can use a Phillips screwdriver to put in the 4 screws. Now that we have the cover back on, we can put the trim ring on. We're just going to set it in place, and then we can go around back and use the Phillips screwdriver to put the screw in to hold it on. Once you have the trim ring on, we can put the bowl back on. To put the bowl back on, we're just going to line up the pins on each side. Once you have it in place, you can push down on the back to snap it in. Once you have it in place, we can put the beater back on. To put the beater back in, we're just going to line it up on the shaft and make sure the pin goes into the cutout and lift it up into place. Turn it counterclockwise to lock it on. Once you have it in place, we can plug the mixer back in and take it for a spin. Thanks for joining us for another successful repair brought to you by AppliancePartsPros.com. Check out our other repair videos on our site, Facebook, and YouTube.